welcome back to my channel. If you are new here and like the video, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button for more content. Thank you for watching. Hello everyone, welcome to the 5th and final day of the fall marathon. Yesterday I gave you fluff, but we're gonna go back into angst because just why not? And this has gone wrong, which makes it even better. Anyways, let's just go ahead and start the video because this is actually a pretty long video for only 2 ships on a prank series. Things have been hard. Between Shirabu getting sick during his pass-out prank, which he has long since recovered from, and the drowning prank. That was a mess. Something that should have never happened. If Shirabu could go back and do things differently, he would, without any hesitation. Maybe he would have told off that little girl's homophobic brother, and maybe have taken the fight somewhere that wasn't the edge of a waterfall. Because even now, months after the fact, Semi still suffered from the accident, from his actions alone. He blamed himself, even though Ushijima and the rest of Shiro Torizawa have done their best to reassure that it wasn't his fault, and it was just a wrong place, wrong time situation. As much as he wanted to believe them, his resolve diminished to nothing, seeing Simi having trouble getting around. While he can walk again, it was with some complications, and bending down to grab something was still out of the question. Sometimes Shirabu would hear the most agonizing sounds come from the odor, and mortifying sounds of bones popping in a not-so-good way. Every time, Simi would reassure him that it was alright, and he was fine, and blame it on his own carelessness, but Shirabu couldn't settle for that. This guilt was never ending. Hey, Shira? Simi poured them both a cup of coffee and set it on the table. I could have done that. Simi laughed. It's fine. I'm okay now. He always had to be reassured. I was wondering, do you want to go to the new bookstore in town today? A date? Even though they have officially been together for a few months, they had rarely been on dates. Things might have turned out differently if the accident didn't happen. Their priority was recovery and reassurance rather than going on dates. Besides, their company was enough. It was only recently they started physically going on dates, since Simi had felt guilty on his end for not doing what normal couples do. It also helped that he was physically getting better, and the fatigue that came with all of his medications was dying down. I would love to. He smiled lovingly at his lover, wanting nothing more than to give him the world. As long as you promise to let you know if something hurts or feels wrong. Yes, I know, love. He chuckled, interrupting him. He loved how much the younger Seta cared and worried. While sometimes it can be overbearing, it was his way of showing that he loved him. The two got changed, not without Shirabu sneaking a glance at his bare back. There was large scarring from when the doctors had to do procedures to keep him alive. Looking at them made his chest throb with a gnawing guilt. He walked over and grazed his fingers over the scars, with Simi almost jumping out of his skin, feeling the cold fingertips on his back. Shira? It was then he knew what was bothering him. I'm okay. Shirabu hugged him from behind, not wanting to let go. I love you. He laughed underneath his breath, twisting in his grasp so that he held Shirabu, placing a small kiss on his forehead. I love you more. The brunette flushed. Semi let go first, throwing a shirt over his head and covering the scar on his back, before he grabbed Shirabu's hand and made their way out the door. While they were walking, Semi was humming a tune that he was currently working on with his guitar, while Shirabu was lost in his thoughts. So much so, he wasn't looking or paying attention to any of his surroundings. Wait, Shira! He was too late. The setter ran straight into a pole, knocking him down onto the ground. Kenjiro! He went to bend down to see if he was okay, but felt his spine pop and hip lock in place, causing him to hiss in pain. He hated this. If his lover is hurt, he should be able to do something about it. Shirabu was dazed, light sending the pain in his head flaring up. The blood oozing from his nose told him he hit the pole hard. Are you okay? He called from above him, almost afraid to try bending down again. The doctor said it would take time for his joints and bones to cooperate with him, but at the current moment, it felt like an eternity. He felt even more helpless when he didn't get a response. Ken? Shirabu shut his eyes tight and blindly reached out, grasping onto Semi's pants leg. Ken, what's wrong? You gotta talk to me. His voice was laced with desperation, hating his body for pressing such limits against him. Even through his eyes that were shut tight, Shirabu could still see a bright red light through his eyelids caused by the sun, so he put his free hand over his eyes. He stood up, traveling his hand that was on Semi's pants leg all the way up so that he wouldn't lose his footing. Can you take me inside somewhere? Now that he was at eye level, the older was quick to be at his side, checking the extent of his injuries. The first thing he noticed was the amount of crimson liquid pouring from his nose, and then his hand covering his eyes. What's wrong? He asked again, but this time more urgent, yet gentle. Please. That's all he said, urging for Semi to take him somewhere, anywhere that was less bright. Less painful. The Ashball looked around, seeing a small corner store right down the road. He linked his hand with the smaller's and began walking in that direction. Once they got inside, Semi placed the latte down on the aisle before running up to the register, asking for a napkin, which the cashier happily obliged. The lights were less dim in the corner. One of the lights just happened to be out. Shirabu hesitantly pried his crystal thimble, deep and velvety eyes, seeing the burning red through his eyelids turn into a calming blue hue. The little source of light still ached, but it was nowhere near as bad as it was before. He met Semi's worried gaze that resembled the color of coal moments with a sharping pure glare that was towards everyone but him, right before the earth turns them into a diamond. Ida? Semi placed the tissue onto the setter's nose, watching the pure white merge into a vibrant red. Are you okay? Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't see there. It was my fault for not paying attention. The taller caressed his hand on the smaller's cheek with tender care. You hit that hole pretty hard. Are you sure? The brunette laughed. I'm sure. What about you? He remembered the sound of his hips popping whenever Semi tried to approach him before. I'm fine, I promise. It doesn't hurt anymore. It's true. It felt like a sharp pain spreading through his entire body before it became nothing but a small throb, and then it would die down within a minute. He was more than okay, seeing that Shiripo was okay. Semi thanked the cashier once more before they left the building, and the two still holding tightly onto each other's hands. You can let go now. In truth, Shiripo was still not accustomed to the physical affection in public, even if it was something as simple as hand-holding. A dark shade of red dusted over his cheeks. We wouldn't want you crashing into another pole, would we? He teased, giving a small, reassuring squeeze to his hand. It was beautiful. He was beautiful. How did he get so lucky? He questioned himself that so many times. The setter had proven himself since the start, and so many times after that. He was willing to die in order for Shiribo not to face death alone while falling down the waterfall. Semi gave him a reason to live after the accident, when he lost hope and guilt ate at him. He was his light. And he would never forget that. The two friends were laying in the same bed about to fall asleep for the night when Tanaka spoke up, looking up from his phone. I can sleep on the floor if you feel uncomfortable. Yeah, no, that's not happening. He wanted to be selfish and accept this time that was his only time that he would be this close to the spiker. As long as he was okay with that. The floor is cold. I don't have a spare bed, so you'll catch a cold that way. He nodded his head, covering his blush with the blanket that they were sharing. He flushed at the thought that the middle blocker actually cared enough that he was worried and that he would get sick. Okay. He turned back to his phone, a screen mere inches away from his face. The brunette snatched it from his hand, followed by a loud protest. Hey! What's that for? The taller tucked the phone behind his back. Your eyes are gonna rot if you keep staring at your phone like that. He looked at where he believed the phone was behind his crush's back. You think that's gonna stop me? He flung the blanket off and swung his leg over EnnoTana so that his knees were on either side of his hips. The middle blocker immediately felt the blood rush to his cheeks when he felt the smaller's bottom rest on his thighs and his hands wrestling with his own. If this meant letting this continue, he was definitely gonna fight back. He maneuvered his body so that he was now pinning Tanaka down onto the bed. Their hands were locked together, EnnoTana's toe pads gemstone-like orbs connected with Tanaka's that reminded him of a cloudy sky with a fierce storm rolling in, yet the traces of a calming sapphire blue. They were both winded from the wrestling each other, but at that moment they were still, except for their chests quickly moving up and down, taking in precious oxygen. Staring into each other's eyes, they were stuck in a trance. Tanaka's phone was long forgotten. EnnoTana dared to move closer, absent-mindedly brushing his thumb over Tanaka's. Their lips were close. Tanaka could smell his crush's minty breath from brushing his teeth only minutes before. It sent the butterflies in his stomach into a frenzy. The brunette paused, as if he were asking if it was okay to continue. That's what the spiker loved about him. He was always the one to ask for consent. It was alluring. Tanaka lifted his head, connecting their lips together, letting his sweet kisses answer his silent question. Their lips moved in sync, hungry and desperate for one another, like they've waited too long for this moment to happen. They moved at the pace of their breath. It was like nothing they've ever experienced before. EnnoTana's hand traveled up and down the latter's torso, making him grunt into the kiss. First kisses are meant to be sweet. This was more than that. This was rich and magical, like they'd done this a million times before. Tanaka had to push it taller for him so that he could catch his breath, his hand never leaving his chest, with the other wrapped loosely over his neck. Their eyes never left each other's gaze that seemed to be stuck in a hazy dream that was out of this world. They were drunk on each other. And only for a slight moment, a flash of utter fear flashed a Smaller's face. This made EnnoTana freeze. What was he doing? They were friends. Nothing more. Sorry. EnnoTana got up from Tanaka, sliding back onto his side of the bed, glancing at his phone that had a black screen opposing from the white sheets. He grabbed it with a heavy heart, handing it to Tanaka, who flashed a sympathetic look, maybe even a look of wanting. The sparker took it, feeling dread well up in his chest. He suddenly felt so cold. Like the mightiest blizzard hit him in the most brutal way possible. The warm blanket that was laced with his addictive scent suddenly felt like nothing. The scent he craved was fading, feeling and warmth was waning. His mind was racing at 100 miles a second. What had he done? This was a mistake. He wanted to keep his feelings at bay because he knew this would happen. He knew that he would ruin his friendship and chase him away. Tanaka glued his eyes to the phone, turning away from EnnoTana, letting silent tears fall into the dead of the night. Tanaka woke up first. His eyes were undoubtedly swollen from the night prior, and even blurry from taking in all of the blue light to distract his mind. He wanted to laugh, but truly didn't have it in him. For once, the loud and almost obnoxious Tanaka was quiet and gloomy. Usually, he would probably take his anger out in an unruly manner, but his heart hurt too much to even be angry. He should be furious, frustrated, livid, something. But only bitter depression consumed his entire being. Was this what rejection felt like? I mean, Tanaka was used to Kyoko ignoring his love confessions, but this was something entirely different. It was only then he realized how much the middle blocker really meant to him. How much he loved him. He felt pressure building behind his eyes when he felt EnnoTana stir on the bed. He stilled, sucking in his breath. No matter what terms they are on, Chigata absolutely cannot see him in this state. He quickly got out of bed, a little too fast, feeling his head spin. Tears were still in his eyes against his will, causing his vision to appear blurry. Tanaka? He sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes with his raven locks all over the place. He glanced at the spiker. His back was turned towards him. Sorry, did I wake you? Not once did he turn the other direction. No. This behavior was odd, suspicious even, especially coming from Tanaka. I'm going to the bathroom. He left before the latter could respond, only increasing his suspicion. To Tanaka's luck, his tears only flooded his eyes, making it almost impossible to see. He marched his way to the bathroom like he would at his own home, except this wasn't his home. The setup wasn't the same. Usually he would go straight, but practically straight in front of Enno's room was a flight of stairs. With his tears blocking his vision, he didn't see or notice until it was too late. EnnoTana was in his room, stretching, wondering how he would confront the spiker about his strange behavior. Before he could think on how he should bring it up, the silence of his room engulfed with the sound of a loud yelp, followed by a deafening thumble and thump. Tanaka? He got up from his seat on the bed. It was quiet. Too quiet. He hastily made his way to the hallway when he witnessed Tanaka's still form on the ground beside the end of the staircase. Tanaka! He ran down the steps, barely catching himself from tumbling down. He dove onto his knees, already hearing Yukai lecturing him in the back of his head for training his knees in such a way, but that didn't matter. Nothing did. He stared at his crush. He was limp on the floor. If it wasn't for the pain expression in his features, he would have guessed that he was just simply sleeping. He carefully turned the spiker around, just in case there was any broken bones. He would halt right away. Fortunately, there was no shifting beneath his skin, yet there was a rather painful lump on his left wrist, and a bruise already forming on the side of his head. Now that he was on his back, EnnoTana gently shook him, waking him. The shoulder groaned, squinting his eyes. Ryu? The spiker's blue-gray eyes shimmered with the glossy tint from before. Are you okay? Does something hurt? He was already reaching for his phone, ready to call for medical help when Tanaka stopped him. His scarred, calloused hands had a rough, yet gentle grip on the latter's wrist. Enno? He sat up, looking around the room. What are you doing? He then looked down at his aching wrist that seemed to throb at the same pace as his pulse. Does your wrist hurt? The swelling lump there seemed to already answer his question, and with his good hand, he brought his hand to his hand, flinching at the tenderness. What happened? I don't know. I just heard a loud noise and saw you at the bottom, not moving. His voice raised slightly, but even still, it did not help Tanaka's state. Sorry. It's okay. His eyes widened, recalling up until the moment he fell. My vision, it blurred. I didn't see the steps. EnnoTana's eyes widened, practically scared out of his mind. He got close, cupping the smaller's face in his hands, inspecting him. Your eyes, did they hurt? Is it still blurry? What about your head? Chikara. He stopped him from rambling, knowing that the middle blocker would let his anxiety take over at any moment. I'm fine, I promise. My vision just blurred for a moment. Worst timing too. He was cut off with the raven's arms wrapping tightly around his neck, pulling him in close. He stilled, hearing a sniffle coming from him. Chikara? Are you crying? Shut up, you dumbass! His trembling voice that cracked made his lips thin into a tight line. I thought you broke your neck or something. I didn't even know what to think when I saw you like that. He had to gasp for air to continue lecturing him in between sobs. Tanaka quickly used his right hand to rub Inoshida's back in a reassuring manner. A silent way of telling him that he was okay. I was so scared. His voice was so small, so brittle. Never once had he seemed so vulnerable. For a second, I could only imagine some of the worst outcomes seeing you still on the floor. Maybe it wasn't your neck. Maybe it was your spine and you became paralyzed. Or maybe you hit your head hard enough to become brain dead. Tanaka felt guilty. If he hadn't been so stupid, so weak, maybe he wouldn't have let his emotion get the best of him and let his own tears be his downfall. He made the one he loved believed he was dead. He was an idiot. I know this is stupid. You just fell down the stairs. But I can't help but think, what if you did die? He didn't know what to say or how to respond to that. A team would be so dull. Life would be so dark. I can't imagine a world without you. Tanaka couldn't explain it, but that same warmth he felt the night before returned. What are you saying? Inoshida finally pulled away from the embrace, reconnecting his hand to the spiker's cheek, staring deeply into those beautiful eyes of his, with tears of his own spilling from his eyes. I love you, you. It was like the air around him evaporated. You do? His vision blurred again, with tears of his own threatening to spill. Inoshida moved his thumb to the corner of his eye, catching his tears before they fell. Wasn't last night a hint? He laughed. But I thought... He was caught off with a sweeter kiss than the night prior. It was full of love and reassurance, giving him the proof he needed. I love you. His words were more clear than before, less shaky from the tears. Tanaka threw himself into Inoshida's arms, using his one good arm to tightly hold onto the middle blocker. I love you. Never once had he imagined that his feelings would be returned. He thought he'd been rejected, and now here he was, a crying mess on the bottom of the staircase, being held into his now lover's arms. After everything was settled down, Inoshida turned back towards the latter's injuries, noticing the swelling in his wrist incredibly increased. He gently took it into his hand and applied pressure to see where it hurt the most. A sharp intake of hair from the spiker told him where the source of pain was. Can you move it? He attempted, only managing an inch in all directions. It was better than nothing. It might just be a sprain. He got up and left, eventually coming back with a medkit. He wrapped a bandage to keep it still. We'll have to keep it iced for the meantime. Although I'm no professional, so you might need to see a doctor. Good call. He grinned at his lover, concentrating on wrapping his wrist. Whenever he did, his tongue would stick out in the corner of his mouth, and his eyebrows would furrow, meaning he was focusing hard. Can you get up? Tanaka stood up, with the help of EnnoTana, and walked towards the couch of the living room. Tanaka was seated on the couch, with pillows surrounding him, and the Raven was running around the house to get him stuff to make the latter as comfortable as possible. His arm was propped up, with a bag of frozen peas settled onto his wrist. Frozen peas? EnnoTana frowned. Well, I don't have an ice pack, so be lucky you got this much. Do you want something to eat? Tanaka couldn't help but laugh. I'm fine, but... Tanaka reached up and grabbed onto the tallest shirt, pulling him down. They connected, feeling each other's lips and love mold into one. He could get used to this. Alright, this officially wraps up the fall marathon. And may I just say, this was a pretty long video considering there was only 2 ships. And the whole scene with EnnoTana was super duper awkward considering my mother was in the other room and it was just awkward. Anyways, let's get on to the question. Again, please note that this question is completely optional, you do not have to answer. But what is one thing you wish to do before winter comes, or before my winter marathon that I'm planning on doing? Yes, you heard that right. I'm going to make it happen. I don't know how, but I am planning on making a winter marathon. And thank you so much for joining on this experiment that was a marathon. That was definitely eventful and very experimental. Thank you so much for watching. As always, if you'd like to be kept up to date, check out any of my social medias. I hope that you all have a wonderful day or evening.